Today, we are taking a deep dive into the quest for artificial intelligence, and we're not looking at the latest GPT model. Nope, we are going way back to the beginning, tracing the historical blueprint, finding those surprising starting points, the philosophical ideas, the scientific sort of clues that really launched the field back in the mid-20th century. Our mission is to figure out why those early AI pioneers, they were armed with computers that barely worked. Why were they so incredibly confident they could build thinking machines, right?
And if you dig deep enough, you realize this dream of intelligent automation, it's really ancient. You kind of have to start with the philosophical need for the idea.
You mean Aristotle, like 300 years before Christ? He's thinking about full automation only to decide it's possible. Exactly.
Aristotle writing between 384 and 322 BCE. He basically argued that for citizens to have leisure, slavery was, necessary because technology could never do all the work. But in saying that, he actually laid out the fantasy blueprint for AI.
He did. Yeah. He wished tools could perform its task either at our bidding or at self-perceiving the need. Even mentioned those mythological self-moving tripods of Ephesus. He wasn't just wishing for a better tool. He wanted a tool that knew what to do.
And that idea, it stuck around. Later on, you get fictional robots and then, actual really intricate mechanical devices. Automata. Think about Jacques de Volcano's mechanical ducks, 1738. It was an amazing clockwork.
The duck that could quack and flap.
Yes, quack, flap its wings, drink water, and famously, it could even appear to digest grain.
Okay, to a non-expert, that sounds pretty intelligent, right? But this is where we hit that crucial difference, isn't it? What were those clockwork things missing?
Perception. They lacked perception. Poke cancels, duck, or even something revolutionary like the Jacquard loom from 1904.
The one with the punch cards for weaving.
That's the one. They were just executing a fixed program. They didn't sense anything. They couldn't adjust based on feedback from the world. If the duck was in the dark or if the green wasn't there, it didn't matter. The clockwork just ran.
So why was sensing the environment such a key turning point? Why didn't that click earlier with automata?
Because reacting to the environment, that makes the behavior seem purposeful. It looks complex, intelligent even. The real shift came with early electromechanical machines that finally built in perception. The classic example has to be Gray Walter's tortoises.
Machina Speculatrix.
That's them. They had simple photocells just to detect light. So sensing light bumping into things and letting that info affect whether they moved or, went to recharge. That basic feedback loop made them seem worlds more intelligent than those purely predictable clockwork devices.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for you. Listening the ancient dreams. There, the first sensing machines pop up. But how to totally separate field logic, psychology, engineering? How did they give us the actual, formal rules to go from a light-sensing tortoise to a computer proving theorems?
That's where the formal clues start stacking up. The first big one was pure logic, and again, it comes from Aristotle, his syllogisms. They showed that complex reasoning patterns could be written down economically like templates using generic symbols.
It's like the famous one Barbara, all A or B, all C or A. Therefore, all C or B, that template.
Precisely. And the key thing is, it doesn't matter what A, B, and C actually mean. The reasoning pattern itself is captured just by manipulating the symbols according to the rules. This idea that thought can be boiled down to shuffling meaningless symbols based on formal rules, that's absolutely foundational for symbolic AI. It's huge.
Okay, clue one logic as symbol manipulation. Then, psychology comes along and gives a structure for behavior, because early psychology just listed behaviors, right? But then people start thinking about internal mechanisms like Freud's, ID, ego, superego.
Right? Those abstract internal parts. But it got much more functional, more computationally useful in the 50s and 60s. In 1960, Miller and his colleagues proposed the TODI unit, that's test operate, test exit. They proposed it as a specific internal mechanism that drives goal-directed behavior.
So Duat gave AI folks a simple kind of repeatable programming pattern for achieving goals. It's a loop. Basically,
It's a feedback loop. Yes. Think about hammering a nail. You test it. Is it flush? If not, you operate, you hit it, then you test again. You keep doing that loop until the test says yes, it's flush, and then you exit that task. It's simple, but it suggested that goal-directed behavior may be the core of intelligence, could be modeled and programmed as these nested loops.
okay, logic psychology. And then the engineers deliver the actual machine, Alan Turing and his logical competing machine, the Church-Turing thesis. That feels like the heavy machinery arriving.
It really was. The thesis basically claimed that the class of functions his theoretical machine could compute is the same as all recursively computable functions. Now that sounds technical. I know for you listening. What it simply means is if a problem can be solved through a finite series of logical steps, a digital computer in theory can solve it. That's like the ultimate generalization of a calculator.
That's just staggering. The digital computer can compute anything that's computable.
It is. But wait, computation isn't only about certainty. They also needed a way to handle the real world, which is, messy and uncertain. And that's where the work of Reverend Thomas Bayes way back in the 18th century suddenly became critical.
Bayes' rule still fundamental today?
Absolutely. Bayes' rule became incredibly important for AI because it provided a solid mathematical way to update your beliefs, the probability of something being true when you get new evidence. You absolutely need that for real-world things like signal detection, trying to pick out a meaningful signal from background noise.
So, okay, but 1956, they've got the ancient dream, formal logic rules, a psychological model like Toady, the universal computer concept from Turing, and even a way to handle uncertainty with Bayes. They felt ready.
They were ready, and they kicked things off formally at the 1956 Dartmouth Summer Project. That's where John McCarthy actually coined the term artificial intelligence. But almost right away, the whole community kind of split into two main camps.
Do they believe in AI?
Yeah. Those who believed intelligence was all about symbolic manipulation, and those who thought it was more like engineering based on how the brain works.
Let's dig into the symbol guys first, the ones who led to what people now call GFAI, good old-fashioned AI. This was really dominated by Alan Newell and Herb Simon, and they came up with the physical symbol system hypothesis, the PSSH.
And they weren't exactly modest about it. The PSSH claimed that a physical symbol system, basically a computer running the right software, had both the necessary and the sufficient conditions for general intelligent action. They really believed they were tackling an intelligence head-on.
The confidence is amazing. You have to love Herbert Simon's quote from January 56. Over Christmas, Alan Newell and I invented a thinking machine, just like that.
Massive confidence, wasn't it? Did they really think they'd cracked it with just one program? Well, their first big effort, the logic theorist, or LU-10, it proved theorems in symbolic logic. It could do things previously only humans could do, like proving theorems from Russell and Whitehead's huge work, Principia Mathematica.
Okay, that's impressive. And after LU-10 came the general problem solver, GPS. You said this one really blurred the lines.
It absolutely did, because they openly claimed GPS wasn't just an intelligent machine, but also a theory of how humans solve problems. So they were mixing up building smart machines with simulating the human mind, which caused, well, a lot of confusion later on.
Okay, so that's the symbolic path. What about the other camp, the connectionists, the brain-style folks?
Right. So Frank Rosenblatt introduced perceptrons in 1957. This was a direct alternative, really inspired by earlier ideas about biological neurons from McCulloch and Pitts and Donald Hebb.
And these perceptrons, they weren't programmed with specific rules, like if this, then that, like the logic theorist. How are they different?
Totally different approach. They were trained using statistics. A perceptron was designed to produce a desired output based on inputs, and this is the key adjustable weights. It tried to mimic basic neuron function. Mathematically, you can think of the core element in a perceptron as defining a decision boundary.
The decision boundary like a line on a graph.
Exactly. Imagine you plot all your input data points. The perceptron tries to draw a straight line or a plane in higher dimensions, a linear boundary that cleanly separates the points. That should give you a yes output A1 from the points that should give you a no output A0. It's statistical. It's distributed. It solves problems by classifying things based on training, not by following logical steps like lieutenant. Completely different philosophy.
Fascinating. So moving into the 70s, people started trying to put these pieces together, right? You need machines that can sense, plan, and act in the real world. The big integration project then was Shaky, the robot at Shri. That thing sounds like a real monster of early AI architecture.
Oh, Shaky was huge. It ran on APDP-10 computer somewhere else in the building, communicating over radio and video links. Its complexity was handled with a 3-layer hierarchy.
Can you walk us through those layers quickly?
Sure. The bottom layer dealt directly with sensors and motors. Pretty basic stuff. The middle layer handled more general primitive actions like go to location X. But the top layer, that was the planner, the brain. It used a method called strips.
Strips. That was the logic engine allowing Shaky to figure stuff out. It wasn't just reacting, it was planning complex sequences that must have taken huge computing power back then.
It really did. The famous demo involved Shaky figuring out how to push a ramp over to a platform, roll up the ramp, and then push a box off the platform. I mean, that's a genuinely complex, multi-step, goal-directed plan. It showed the power of that symbolic planning approach when coupled with sensing and acting.
And while Shaky was pushing blocks around, those non-symbolic statistical methods were quietly finding success in specific areas, especially dealing with noisy real-world data.
Yeah, think about the Manos third system back in the 1960s. It was built for pattern recognition. It got over 98% accuracy, recognizing hand-printed Fortran characters. That was a serious practical achievement.
And practical results like that led towards the first expert systems, showing that deep specific knowledge could overcome general complexity. The heuristic dendral program in the 70s seems like a perfect example of that shift.
Dendral is a classic. It didn't try to solve everything. It was laser-focused on chemistry. It had expert chemical knowledge encoded into thousands of specific rules. It used these rules to figure out molecular structures from mass spectrometer data.
Why was embedding all that expert chemistry knowledge so important?
Because it massively cut down the search space. Instead of blindly checking every possibility, Dendral could use chemical laws to prune away millions of impossible or unlikely structures right from the start. In one famous case, it took a problem with something like 14.7 million possible structures and narrowed it down to just one correct structure. By using the rules and some extra data, it showed that if you specialize in PAC, in deep knowledge, you could sometimes sidestep that brute force computation problem.
But even with these successes, this huge theoretical argument pops up, attacking the very foundation of symbolic AI. John Searle and his Chinese room argument.
Searle's Chinese room. Yes, that thought experiment really hit a nerve. It directly challenged the physical symbol system hypothesis. The SSH Searle argued that just manipulating symbols according to rules, no matter how complicated the rules or the program, isn't the same as understanding. His scenario is, imagine you're locked in a room. You get slips of paper with Chinese characters which you don't understand passed under the door. You have a huge book of rules in English telling you which Chinese characters to pass back out based on the ones you received. You could get really good at following the rules, fooling people outside into thinking you understand Chinese. But you don't, right? You're just manipulating symbols based on syntax. You lack semantics, meaning what Storr called intentionality or aboutness.
So the computer's just like the person in the room following a complex recipe, without any idea what the food tastes like, or even that it is food. What did the symbolic AI folks say back? If logic theorist proves theorems, doesn't it understand logic in some sense?
Well, the PSSH defenders argued you have to look at the whole system. Intentionality, they said, doesn't come from just the program in isolation. It arises when the computer, plus its sensors and actuators connecting it to the real world, links those internal symbols to external things. It's the whole embodied system, the computer grounded in reality, that achieves meaning, not just the abstract symbol shuffling inside the box.
Okay, philosophical debates aside, the researchers ran smack into a very practical, very real wall that stopped a lot of the early grand ambitions. The combinatorial explosion.
Yes, this is the killer, the logistical nightmare of exponential growth. If Dentrell only had to check, say, 1,000 possibilities, fine. But for general problems, like trying to look ahead in a complex game or plan a long sequence of actions, the number of possibilities just explodes. It grows exponentially faster than any computer could possibly handle.
Give us a scary nap on that again.
Okay, imagine a simple search tree. At each point, you have just 3 choices, a branching factor of 3. If you search 10 steps deep, you have to check about 88,000 possibilities. That's doable, but double the search depth to 20 steps. The number of possibilities doesn't just double it, blows up to nearly 8 billion.
8 billion.
Yeah, that kind of exponential growth just paralyzes purely search-based methods for anything non-trivial. It forced that move towards knowledge-heavy specialized systems.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Well, that initial incredible excitement driven by the dream of the universal computer solving everything. It got hit hard, by the brutal reality of complexity. And these really deep philosophical questions about what understanding or meaning even is.
Exactly. The early ambition, like with GPS, was maybe to find one single universal mechanism for general intelligence, but the combinatorial explosion showed that was pretty much impossible, at least with the tech and methods they had then. So the field pivoted hard away from the general towards the specific. The big successes were those knowledge-rich expert systems like Dendril, like MyCIN. Later on, Marvin Minsky even famously suggested that maybe human intelligence itself isn't some elegant, unified general principle. Maybe it's just a clutch.
A clutch meaning like a messy collection of tricks.
Kind of a huge collection. Maybe hundreds or thousands of specialized, ad hoc, maybe slightly imperfect mechanisms all wired together somehow. Not one beautiful algorithm and lots of little solutions.
That really reframes the whole quest for human-level AI, doesn't it? It suggests maybe we should stop looking for that one single magic bullet.
It suggests maybe we need to build it up in stages. Maybe copy how humans actually develop intelligence. Rodney Brooks, who's been a major figure in AI and robotics, he suggested exactly that. Stop aiming for adult genius right away. Focus on getting the basics right first, like the capabilities of a young child, right?
He had those 3 specific benchmarks, didn't he?
He did. He proposed aiming for the object recognition capabilities of a 2-year-old child, then the language capabilities of a 4-year-old child, and finally the manual dexterity of a 6-year-old child.
Okay, so here's the final thought for you to chew on. If a machine really mastered those 3 things, recognizing objects like a toddler, talking like a preschooler, and handling things like a first grader, would you accept that as truly intelligent? Or would Searle's Chinese room question, that question about real understanding versus just Clover simulation, still be nagging at you? Something to think about as the quest continues.